Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. I explore the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and science. And today I have a guest on that's going to talk about a topic that I'm really excited about, and that is hypnosis and hypnobirthing. So Patty Castellanos is a mom of two with a master's degree in mental health counseling, a certification in clinical hypnosis from the International Association for Counselors and Therapists, and a certification as a hypnobirthing childbirth educator through Hypnobirthing International. Patty empowers individuals to break through subconscious patterns of behavior and limiting beliefs. So welcome, Patty. I'm really excited to have you here.
Hey, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely love talking about hypnosis, the power of the mind, and how it empowers women and mothers to use it for birth. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So hypnosis is something that I love talking about as well. And it's a tool that I've used throughout my healing journey over the last 2 decades. I've used it in various ways, through past life regression hypnosis, I work with a hypnotist. I have for several years now, just on whatever's going on in my life. I go and see her for a session. We record a little track, a 20-minute track, and then she hands it over to me and I get to listen to it over and over again. Actually, my husband has it memorized because I usually fall asleep to it and he knows it by heart now. And and also, no secret on the show, I'm pregnant and I'm going to be doing hypnobirthing myself. So I'm really excited to dive into all of it with you. And, let's talk about hypnosis as if the audience doesn't know anything about it, because sometimes, I like to demystify a lot of the things that we have on the show. So can you tell us a little bit about, the process of hypnosis, what it means to hypnotize someone?
Absolutely. And I love how you said, let's talk about it as if most people don't even know what it is. Because the truth is, a lot of people think about hypnosis through the myths and the misconceptions that are out there, right? I mean, stage hypnosis is a lot of fun and everybody loves going to stage hypnosis shows. But the truth is, that's only one part of hypnosis. And many of us are actually in hypnosis throughout our day, and we don't even understand what it means. I mean, have you ever gotten into the car and started driving somewhere? Maybe you got a call from somebody, and all of a sudden you get into this awesome conversation. You get to where you're going. You don't even realize how long you've been driving, but that conversation was so good that it really helped you get where you were going faster and easier.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. That's actually one of the examples I give when I try and explain what the alpha brainwave state is to people. So, yes.
Absolutely. That's the process of hypnosis. Another thing, have you ever started reading a book and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, fine. I'm just going to read a chapter or maybe 2. And before you know it, you're completely sucked into the book and you can't even put it down. And it's 2:00 in the morning. You should get to sleep, but you really can't put it down. That's a process of hypnosis. Or how about Netflix? Netflix is really that thing that gets you hooked, right? You start watching one episode and you're like, oh, you know what? I'll just watch an episode, maybe 2 if time permits. And before you know it, you've been binge watched the entire season and you don't even want to go to sleep. Well, that's a process of hypnosis. Or how about that time that maybe you turned on, XM radio, or you popped on a song from your playlist, and all of a sudden you're transported back to an incredible time in your life that triggered a memory. That's tapping into your subconscious mind.
Okay, so I think all of these examples are things people can totally relate to. So, if someone's listening to this and they're like, how's that hypnosis? Explain that.
That's the process of tapping into your subconscious mind. You see, our memories are stored in our subconscious mind through that process of mental emotional, physical, and sometimes even spiritual connections. So, therefore, when we go back and we really understand what that subconscious mind is, it's essentially that part of us that is kind of working in the background, right? It's a collection of our habits, our experiences, and our patterns that really create where we are now. So, nobody had to teach us how to drive. Nobody had to teach us how to get hooked onto a song that is tied to a memory. All of those things are experiences that become a part of us. And we're able to use the resources that we have, which are things that helped us get through experiences, in order to help us really manage whatever stressors we have in our lives.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So, when I teach about the subconscious mind, a lot of what I teach about is, we often need to reprogram it, right? Because so much of what is our subconscious mind is built around is what happened before the age of 7, right? Because
Yeah.
kids until they're the age of 7 are in a theta brainwave state. So they're like literally sponges. They're just soaking it all up.
Yeah.
It's like they're programmable. They're just downloading information. So, can you talk a little bit about, like, can the subconscious mind be reprogrammed? And is that what you use hypnosis for?
That is what we use hypnosis for. And hypnosis is something that, of course, you can do with a practitioner, such as myself, such as, anybody that you would meet with. But it's also something that we can do on our own. Like you mentioned, the recording that then your hypnosis practitioner gives you, right? And after the age of 7, we really are functioning on a lot of patterns and habits that we go through. So, therefore, when we talk about rewiring the mind or even reprogramming the mind, it's about really breaking through some of those patterns that have been created. And if I can be honest, some of those patterns aren't even our fault. They can
Totally.
be things that Absolutely. They can be things that maybe we heard, right? Things that somebody else said, experiences that we've seen, or maybe even things that we perceived. The truth of the matter is that the patterns that we experience half the time aren't even ours to begin with.
Absolutely, especially when we're talking about a child, right? Your
Yeah.
your inner voice, your lens, your belief system is formed from the opinions of the adults you grew up around, cultural conditioning, that teacher that said, "Hey, you're a really good singer," or "You're not that good at math." So, absolutely. And I think I really love that you use the word perception. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that? Because I talk about that a lot too, and I think it's important to repeat as many times as needed.
Absolutely. You see, we have a lens, we have a viewpoint from which we see the world. And that lens can be clouded depending on the experiences that we've had, whether they have been, difficult experiences, experiences that have caused resentment, maybe things that we're holding on to that create that viewpoint. And in order to be able to shift into a new way of thinking, a new way of experiencing, a new perspective, we have to be able to think beyond whatever, is potentially blocking that viewpoint. Maybe that is a fear or a stressor. Maybe that's something that we've created for ourselves as a sense of protection that is keeping us safe. Or maybe that's just something that we're holding on to because it's easier to hold on to than to do something else. So, therefore, when we begin to break through some of those patterns, some of those experiences that we've had, when we begin to actually shift into a new way of thinking, a new way of believing, then we actually begin to reprogram our minds, reprogram our experiences so that we begin to create new neural pathways in our brain to be able to build that new source of safety.
I love so much of what you just shared. So I like that you mentioned that it might have kept us safe at one point. You know, sometimes I talk about it's like we have this armor we put on ourselves, and it might have kept you safe at one point, but maybe now it's not doing so much for you, right? It's getting rusty, it's getting stiff, it's getting stuck, and sometimes it's hard to take that armor off. So, you know, do most people understand that they have these perceptions, or are most people just kind of like living their life through this filter? And you're nodding already, so I want to hear what you have to say. Maybe you know where I'm going with it.
Exactly. Most people actually don't know what they don't know,
Yeah.
right? They're living their lives and they're doing what they're doing. Half the time they're like, well, why do I keep meeting the same kinds of people? Why do I keep doing the same things over and over again? Why do I keep pleasing other people and breaking, my own boundaries, when the truth is I just want to live my life? Why? And those whys are usually the reason why people actually say, I've got to do something different. But people have no idea that they're living their lives out of a particular filter that usually isn't serving them, until all of a sudden it's like, whoa, hold on, this is all making sense now. And that typically happens when somebody begins to say, hey, how about we look at this, and this that's actually going on in your life? And what if we instead consider this? And then all of a sudden, everything opens up for them.
Yeah, I was literally right before this having a conversation with someone. So have you read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People?
I have, actually, a couple of times.
Yeah, so exactly. So I had read it once, and it's been a while, and I was just the other day, like a week ago, out of nowhere, I was like, oh, I'm gonna re-listen to it, and I've only listened to the first part of it so far, but I had this moment where it was almost disheartening because who is it? Dale Carnegie, right? Yeah, it's Dale Carnegie for listeners. Was saying that we all validate ourselves, right? It's very, very rare that someone, if they screw something up or they mess up or they make a mistake, thinks in their mind, oh, that was my fault, I made that mistake. Instead, they're thinking about how it's not their fault, how it's someone else's fault, how they did everything right, how maybe they're being blamed unfairly, or whatever it is, but they're not taking the responsibility onto themselves, right? And as maybe a third party, knowing that someone made a mistake and not being able to like own up to it is kind of it's an interesting, we'll say, kind of a psychological thing to witness. So, how does that play into all this?
Well, when somebody begins to take personal responsibility for their actions, then they can take accountability. And you see, one thing I tell people all the time is that just because something is happening doesn't mean that you can't influence it, right? Because the truth of the matter is, when we accept things for what they really are, then we can make the next best intentional choice for ourselves. And accepting something doesn't mean we like it, doesn't mean we don't like it. It just means that it is what it is. So therefore, when we begin to accept things for what they are, we can then take personal accountability, personal responsibility for whatever it is that we need to do in our lives. And when we begin to do that, then all of a sudden, we stop the blame game. We stop pointing fingers, and instead we begin to let go of the things that we can't control, to be able to take back control of the things in our lives that we in fact can control.
Yeah. And I think I love what you said. And I think that's an issue happening with society right now, is that it's almost become trendy to be a victim and to place blame on others and to put everything on an outside force, whether it's a person or a situation or a circumstance, rather than stepping into your own power and taking
Yeah.
responsibility for your life. So here's a question for you. And and I'm asking because you were talking about once you see things how they really are. Do you think people can ever see things how they really are, like the pure objective truth? Because we all see things through our own lens, like we've been talking
Yeah.
about, like, right? That's why eyewitness testimonies are so unreliable, because 10 different
Hmm.
people could witness something and see it from 10 different points of view. Like,
Hmm.
can people ever get to that objective point?
Well, that objective point is yours and yours alone.
Hmm.
And it's mine and mine alone. And it's, individual to whoever it is. Because the truth of the matter is
Would that be subjective
everybody,
though?
it can absolutely be subjective, but it's your truth. It's my truth. It's our truth. And when we are able to live and own our truth, then we're able to take personal responsibility to make the best choices for ourselves. Because here's the thing, everybody's going to come at us with their own opinions, their own expectations, and their own ideas of how we should all live our lives. And then we turn around and we blame other people when things don't work out for us, but we never did it according to what was right for us. We did it according to what was right based on everybody else's expectations and opinions. So when we're able to take personal responsibility and accountability based on what is right for ourselves, then we can actually do things that are based on our reality, our truth, and move from there, not because somebody else told us what we had to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like every time you have a conversation with someone, you're not having a conversation with that person. You're having a conversation with their lens, their belief
Yeah.
system, the opinions of the adults they grew up around, right? Their perceptions. So, okay, you're talking about everyone has their own truth, but someone's truth can be a delusion, right? Because there is like an ultimate truth. Like if there's a car accident, right? And I'm just genuinely curious about this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot because it's just a fascinating, thing to think about. Let's say there's a car accident. There's very specific truth, but all of these different people are seeing it through their own lens. So how can each person have their own truth when there is a truth?
Well, how are you choosing to relate to the world?
Mm,
Right. And from a mental wellness perspective, you also have to look at how are you feeling internally? How are you relating to the world? How are you relating to yourself? Do you feel congruent with the way that this truth is affecting you? And also, how are all of the different patterns and habits that you're creating in your life aligned with the way that you're living your life? Because you're right, there can be a lot of disparities. And if you're living according to a delusion, then that absolutely is not mental wellness. Instead, that is something that is very different than, you know, somebody who's living according to their truth. But if you're living in a way that is authentic and it's healthy and it's relating to other people, both socially and also personally, then in that case, you absolutely are living a valid truth.
all right. So I'm gonna ask one more question on this to play devil's advocate, and then we can move on. And again, it's just because I'm super curious, and I was just having a conversation with someone about all this beforehand, and I just think it's really fascinating to think about. So if someone is blaming a person for something that they perceive that person to have done, and that person didn't do that thing, but the person A who's blaming them is living according to their truth and their perception, how does how does how do you How do you come to terms with that? How do you deal with that? How does that person ever find healing? How does the person who's being accused of something ever find justice? How do you navigate all that?
That's a really good question. And it always goes back to one very important part, right? As a recipient of something that, for whatever reason, is being said to you that is untrue or that is invalid, the truth is, not everybody is going to provide you with what you need. Not everything is going to be valid or fulfilling. And sometimes, if whatever it is that you are the recipient of, whether it's a blame, sometimes it's about recognizing and owning your story, owning who you are, and also being okay with the fact that not everybody is going to understand what your story is. Some people, for whatever reason, are going to have their very own version of what a story is, and they're never going to be able to meet you halfway or even provide you what you need. So at that point, I'm going to be honest with you, healing comes from the ability to recognize boundaries, right? To be able to go back to, like we were talking about self-hypnosis earlier, and owning your source of safety, almost as if you can imagine it as a bubble that you create around yourself. And recognizing that there are certain things that you can absolutely let go of, and that's it. Let go of the fact that that person is never going to give you what you need. They are never going to be able to provide you with that truth. And that's okay. You can let go of that. You can choose to leave them just outside of that, life, that daily life that you live. If it's somebody that for whatever reason you need to interact with on a regular basis, then you can just choose to remain civil and make sure that you understand what you can and you can't receive from that person.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. So let's get back to hypnosis. Thanks for indulging me, because it's so fascinating talking about psychology and perception and lens. And I love hearing people's perspective on it. So thank you. So you use the phrase, you can build new neural pathways. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that something that hypnosis helps you do? And what does that look like inside your brain?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. Our nervous system is actually very much connected to our experiences, our thoughts, our actions, and the way we relate to the world around us. So therefore, when we are able to actually recognize our thoughts, that's just a thought, such as, okay, there's a thought, or a feeling, recognize it for what it is. Oh, that's a feeling. Oh, yeah, that feels a little heavy. Or wow, that feels exciting. Recognizing the way our body actually relates to these things, such as noticing any stress, tension, anxiety within our body, any heaviness, any sort of feelings within our body. And of course, the way that we choose to relate to the world, we then begin to see how those interactions work. And when we create a change in one of those areas, the amazing thing is that neurologically, we begin to create change in other parts of our bodies. So therefore, when we are able to then create a change in our thoughts, we're able to naturally create a change in our feelings. When we're able to change a feeling and see things like, we were talking about from a different perspective, then we're able to affect the way that our body moves, does things, and relates. So we are able to create that change and create those new neural pathways based on the way that we create change in our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, and our behaviors.
It's so fascinating, right? You can literally reprogram your brain. And like you said,
Yeah.
it can start from a thought alone. Our
Yeah.
thoughts are so powerful. And like you said, when we started, our subconscious mind is so, so powerful. So, how does hypnosis work? Is that how it works? Does it create these new neural pathways, or is there something more to it?
Well, the hypnosis really is a process of focused attention,
Hmm.
right? And when we continuously focus on those things that we don't want, then we're actually going to get more of those things that we don't want. So in hypnosis, and you're nodding, you totally get this, right?
Yeah.
In hypnosis, what we are doing is that we are giving our bodies and our brains permission to receive a new way of thinking, a new way of being, to then be able to experience a new way of believing. So, what does this actually look like? Well, the truth is, some people are going to experience a very deep state of relaxation. Some people will experience maybe a light floating sensation, and other people might experience absolutely no change whatsoever. And they might feel just like they're sitting in a chair having a normal conversation, just like you and I are,
Hmm.
right? And there's no right or wrong way to experience hypnosis. What is important is that you're open to the changes that you're looking to create.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And as you were talking, I was thinking back to something I haven't thought about in a while, was that I was so afraid of hypnosis before I knew what it was. Because I was thinking either one of two things. One, someone was going to plant these subliminal messages into my brain and I wouldn't have control over it because I would just be out. Or two, and it's so funny to like think about now because it's just so ridiculous. Or two, they were going to get me to admit to all of these things while I was like in this trance state. And I just want to say for listeners, neither of those things happened. Neither of those things do happen. It's not like, you might have heard in the movies. But I've experienced a couple different kinds of hypnosis, one where I was doing most of the talking and one where the practitioner was doing most of the talking. So is there a difference between those two, or is it just like practitioners, whatever expertise they're doing?
Here's the thing, at least in my practice, hypnosis is a collaborative experience,
Hmm.
right? Some sessions it's going to be more of the practitioner talking, and I will lead that client in whatever it is that they need to be, supported and guided through. And there's always a collaboration, which means I will, set up what we call ideomotor signals, which is just a fancy word for saying, I'm going to tell you, give me a nod or give me a thumbs up whenever it is that you're feeling this, right? Or I might say, be in this experience now. Notice what you're noticing and share with me what this is like for you now. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What's going on? And I will give those clients that place and space to be able to share, right?
That's really beautiful.
And
I don't know if I've ever been in one where it was collaborative like that. That's really interesting. It's cool.
you see, the reason why I love doing collaborative hypnosis sessions is because at the end of session, I always let my clients know you can always return to this experience to be able to re experience whatever it is that you need to receive from this. And all you need to do is, and I'll give them whatever it is that they need to do, right? Based on the session. And because they experienced it with me, because they were able to share their story, because they were fully in the moment, it makes it that much easier for them to be able to go back into that experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I also, another tool I've used a lot throughout my life is self-hypnosis. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with Jose Silva? Because he's,
I am the Silva method. Absolutely.
yeah, so that's been something that I've used. I read his book, You the Healer, like 20 years ago, and I practiced it exactly how it told you to, and I've got it down, and it's something that I've used in my own healing journey. And and a lot of times when I say that I'm meditating, I'm really using the Jose Silva method to like get down to that alpha or theta brainwave state, and then I go into meditation. So is self-hypnosis kind of like meditation? Is this like a guided meditation when you work with a practitioner? What are the differences?
Okay. So I really believe that all hypnosis really leads to self hypnosis.
Mm,
And what does that really mean? That means that the more you practice it, the more you are able to go into that state of self hypnosis where you create change. And meditation, guided meditation, yoga practices, things like that really are able to then help you learn the process of self hypnosis.
mm,
And what's the difference? A goal. What is your goal?
okay.
Really, self hypnosis is that process of meditation with its work boots on, right?
I like
You're
that.
going in with a goal, you're going in deeper into that state of mind to really create that change into that goal. And when you're in that process, you're also able to future pace. What does that mean? That means you're able to see yourself doing whatever it is that you need to do, that you're able to actually create those experiences, feel whatever you need to feel, and pull the resources to be able to help you create those successes.
I love that you just brought that up because you're using the law of attraction, you're using the quantum field to literally envision, I say the life of your dreams, but it could be healing, it could be whatever, a peaceful birth, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And when you have that clear vision, when you put yourself in that feeling state, you really close your eyes and visualize it, and you put yourself in that alpha or brainwave state or theta brainwave state, that's when that magic happens, right? That's when
Oh my gosh, yes.
you're a conscious creator. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's where that magic happens because that's when it becomes a true multi-sensory experience.
Yeah.
That's when you're able to see it, feel it, experience it, know what it really means for you. And the interesting thing is that some people might not be able to see something visually, but they can feel it so deeply, it's almost as if they're there, right? You might be able to pick up the sense of your surroundings or maybe whatever it is that that means for you, and it becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah. That's interesting that you brought that up. I remember being in yoga teacher training with someone who couldn't visualize. He was like,
Oh
we were
yeah.
like, what do you mean? He was like, I would close my eyes and it's just black. Like there's nothing there. I can't imagine anything. And it just blew my mind that someone doesn't have an inner vision like that. Cause I have like such a strong inner vision.
That's actually called, yeah, and that's actually called aphantasia,
Okay.
right?
I haven't heard that word.
And many people out there don't know that it's actually a thing. They actually think that there's something wrong with them because, oh my gosh, why can't I see this? Why can't I visualize it? And the truth is, some people are perfectly normal because that's just the way that they experience life. And aphantasia doesn't mean that you can't experience hypnosis. It just means that you need to be with a really skilled practitioner that is going to be able to help you do things in the way that's right for you.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking My husband took me for an anniversary once to a dining in the dark restaurant where
Oh yeah.
all the wait staff is blind and it's pitch black in there, and it tries to give you the experience of what it's like to be blind. And you can't see your hand in front of your face. And in my head, I had this just vivid imagery of what our table setting looked like. I could see what the bowls looked like and the plates and the silverware and where it was all placed and the cup and like all the food, and I could see what the restaurant looked like, and it was just all visualization in my head. And then at one point, my husband, we were some of the last people in there, and he cheated, and he got in trouble for cheating, but he turned his cell phone light on really quick, and it looked nothing like what I had imagined, right? Like nothing at all. But it was just like how my mind coped with it, right? That I had just created this vivid scene in my head because my eyes were open, but I couldn't see anything. It was just wild. So it's almost like the opposite of aphantasia.
Oh, absolutely. And the truth is, you had that incredibly vivid experience. And for you, you were able to visualize it completely different than what it actually was, but in the way that was right for you,
Yeah.
right? You made that beautiful visual connection to that experience in a way that was 100% unique to you. And exactly in that same way, somebody that may have aphantasia might be able to connect with the smells that they smelled, with the textures on the table, with the heaviness in the room or the lightness, with the temperature that they feel in the room, maybe even any sounds that they experience in that room. Maybe even the way that they were spatially sitting at the table created their experience. And then, rather than being able to visualize what they experienced, it was instead about noticing what that experience meant for you. Notice what that feeling is like. Notice what the surroundings feel like. And it's about creating a heightened sense of awareness to all of the other things that you're surrounded by to create whatever it is that you need to create in that moment.
That's so beautiful. I love everything you just said. That was just such a lovely depiction. And there's 11 million sensory receptors that humans have, and 10 million of those 11 million are dedicated to sight. So it's like when we turn off our sight, everything else lights up. And maybe that's your internal vision, but maybe it's every other sensory receptor that, like you just mentioned. So that's really cool. I loved what you just said. That was beautiful. Okay, so we know there's so many benefits to hypnosis. How have you personally seen people change using hypnosis?
Oh my gosh, so many incredible experiences. And I really work with women and mothers in that space between preconception and parenting. So for me, it's beautiful being able to see all of the different things that they have been able to experience, create their very own successes in whatever way is unique to them in their motherhood journey. And in my life in particular, hypnosis has been fantastic for building my confidence, decreasing stress and anxiety. And of course, hypnosis was actually my gateway into hypnobirthing. I actually was the one that became trained in hypnosis. And I said, wait a minute, if it's creating so many great success stories for my clients, what about using it for my own birth? And it was actually my birth experience personally that led me into helping my clients with hypnobirthing.
So did you have a birth experience that was stressful and then you were like, I need to do something different next time? Or were you just like, oh, before I go into this first one, I want to see if I can do this with myself?
Okay, so I wish I was that second story. And I actually constantly tell people when they come to me as first time moms, and I say, I am so incredibly thrilled that you're here because you are really the ones that are creating new experiences to be able to go out into the world and tell people from the very first time that you can birth in a different, calmer, more informed way. Because, yeah, it was actually that first story that got me where I am today, right? I did, do the cliche stuff. I read what to expect when you were expecting. I followed all of the rules. I did what my doctor said. I took the 30-minute hospital class. And the truth of the matter is, I didn't do much else. And, my first baby actually just turned 12. And 12 years ago, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I had an uninformed birth. I had no clue about the mind body connection. I had no idea that my body and my baby actually work together for birth. I just thought, well, you know what? When the time is right, when those contractions start, I call my doctor, I go into the hospital. A few hours later, my body basically births a child and I'm good to go. Well, didn't happen that way. I got to the hospital. The nurses said, "Oh, honey, you know what? You don't need to experience pain. We'll just give you an epidural and you can just rest." Well, I did that. I got the epidural. 8 hours later, my doctor comes in, taps on his watch, and says, "You know what? You haven't progressed any more past the 4 centimeters. It's time to take you back to a cesarean section." And I was left feeling like an absolute failure. What did I do wrong? Sure, of course, I was relaxing, I was laughing, but the last thing I wanted was to have a cesarean section. I had difficulty nursing my baby. I had a tough recovery. It was not fun. And needless to say, all of the things that I thought I was going to get to do didn't quite work out that way. And that's when I said, hold on, what could I have done different? What could have changed this experience? And that is when I started learning about the mind body connection. That's when I started learning about the fact that our babies and our bodies and our minds are connected for birth. And we don't even give our babies credit for the fact that they're active participants in birth. So then that led me to hypnosis, and I became certified in hypnosis. And I said, all right, I'm helping clients to reduce stress and anxiety. I'm helping clients to work through traumatic experiences in their own lives. And I said, wait a minute, if this is working so great, how about for birth? And that's when I took a hypnobirthing class. And that's when I became informed. That's when I learned how the body really worked, that brain body connection, and the fact that our babies intuitively work with us for birth. And I actually then had a vaginal birth after cesarean. Many people don't even talk about VBACs, right? They're like, wait a minute, the standard in the United States is once a cesarean, always a cesarean. But the reality is a healthy mother with a healthy baby and a very supportive provider is actually able to have a vaginal birth after cesarean. And when you begin to do the research and find out more information about it, hypnobirthing is incredibly supportive of many birth choices that people don't really learn or know about.
So thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it. I was like on the edge of my seat while you were talking. I can't believe that they gave you a C-section after only 8 hours of pushing. That seems crazy.
8
Uh,
hours of labor, not even pushing.
yeah, that's insane. Uh, can you talk more about how our babies and our bodies are connected? Because I've never heard anyone say it like that, and I just want to know more because that's really fascinating.
Absolutely. Our babies in utero, from the day of conception, they are actually receiving everything that we put into our bodies, right? We're constantly talking about nutritious food and clean water and, those kinds of things. But our babies are actually receiving also our hormones, whether it's, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, or oxytocin, which is our love hormone, our happy hormone, endorphins, which are able to relax us, and, adrenaline, which then goes into that fight or flight. Our babies are receiving everything that we put into our bodies, and they are active participants. Our babies are listening, they are thriving, they are moving, they're receptive to light, they're receptive to motion, which is actually very often why when moms pause, breathe, and connect with their babies usually get more active because all of a sudden they're paying attention, they're noticing, and they're able to then be able to get mom's attention, right? It's so cool because when we go through that hypnosis process, many people say, wow, I was able to feel my baby moving, interacting so much more. And that's because parents build their connections with their babies when they are intuitively listening and connecting.
Totally. And that's so interesting and fascinating. And I'm curious, in the birth experience specifically, how are babies and bodies connected? What is the baby's, you said they're active participants in the birth. Tell me more about that.
Well, you mean in the actual birth process, like when baby is being born?
Yeah, yeah, because that's what you said, right? That they're active participants. Yeah.
Well, they're active participants all the way from the very first day of conception, right? As they're growing and as they're developing, they are listening. They are, connecting with mom. They're looking for that connection to the external world. But in the actual birthing process, the uterus, which is made up of 3 different muscle layers, actually begins to surge, right? And in typical, English language, we talk about them in contractions. But in hypnobirthing, we talk about them as surges or waves. Why? Because it's just easier to understand what's going on, right? So therefore, in that actual labor and birth process, the muscles begin to surge, and as they move in and out, that baby is engaging, moving down that birth path and moving, squirming down and engaging down through that birth path. Every surge moves that baby closer and closer to those perineal tissues. And as that happens, mom is breathing through different breathing practices and helping that baby and that body work seamlessly together. As that happens, the cervix softens and begins to open and move out of the way. Baby engages, continues moving down that birth path with that breathing techniques, right? Those breathing techniques that help baby move down. And the incredible part is that when that breathing and the baby are working together, then the natural expulsive reflex kicks in, right? And that natural expulsive reflex is exactly that. It is a reflex. It is a natural process that as the baby moves down, the muscles soften, relax, move out of the way, and essentially are helping to push baby down and through.
Yeah, thank you for explaining all that because I'm pregnant, but I'm freaking clueless right now. I was just telling someone I've been so busy. I haven't read a book. I haven't had a chance to do anything yet. I'm only a month 6, so I have time. But it's interesting that you were talking about the muscles needing to soften because when you think about labor and delivery, oftentimes it's like clenching and screaming, right? So
Oh my gosh.
it's like that sense of relaxing. And you were talking about specific breathing techniques. So are there specific breathing techniques are there breathing techniques that are specific to hypnobirthing, or are they the same as Lamaze breathing?
They're a little bit different. And
Okay.
the interesting thing is that the hypnobirthing program was actually based on a lot of the different things that were researched in the 60s and the 70s.
Hmm.
And the hypnobirthing techniques, there's 3 main breathing techniques that are used. And the way that they're used is both individually and collaboratively, right? In the different stages of pregnancy, labor, and delivery. And the way that those breathing techniques work is actually by helping to relax the body, refocus that body and the mind to then help that pelvic floor completely release and relax. And one of the interesting thing is that most people, like you said, think about, oh, tiny, tiny, tiny. And every movie that we see out there, what do they talk about? Hold your breath, hold it tight, count to 10, and push, right? But have you ever done an exercise where you held your breath?
I didn't even know
No,
that they told you to hold your breath. That's kind of wild to me that they tell you to hold your breath. Is
they
that
tell you to hold your breath.
is that
Exactly.
traditional Lamaze? They tell you that?
No, 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 not in Lamaze.
Okay.
In standard birthing practices, that's what they do. They
Oh,
tell you to hold your breath, count to 10, and push. But that's
wow.
not effective, is it? Have you ever exercised where you held your breath and it worked?
No, of course not.
Of course not.
Oh, that's wild.
So, just like in martial arts or yoga or in exercise, the idea is that you use the power of your breath to help relax that pelvic floor, relax your muscles, and bring that power all the way down so that you can take that breath in and imagine that breath flowing all the way down to those perineal tissues to help them open, release, and relax.
So what is the biggest benefit of hypnobirthing? Is it helping people get rid of fear? Is it helping them release muscle tension? Does it actually uh, reduce pain? Does it get rid of labor pain totally? And I know we're getting close to time, so hopefully that's okay to answer that.
Absolutely, completely okay. And here's the thing, what does pain even mean, right? Have you ever been running out of your house and maybe you were grabbing everything haphazardly? You ran out of the house, you bumped your hand on the way out, and all of a sudden you just kept going, you locked the door and got to wherever you were going, right? And then maybe when you got home, you took your clothes off, you just were relaxing, right? And all of a sudden you look at your hand, ooh, why does it feel sore, right? And that's typically because, you know, you didn't even realize that you bumped your hand on the way out. And you were going through the hustle and bustle of your day that you didn't even realize it. But when you were actually home, able to actually notice what was going on in your body, that's when you were able to really hone in on what happened. And it's very similar to the process of labor and delivery. Many people think that it's going to be something very painful, very difficult, very awful, right? Because that's what society talks about. But when you're able to focus on one surge at a time, use your breathing techniques, fully relax into the process. And here's the key in my experience: surrender.
Hmm.
Really surrender to your body, your baby, and the experience. So much so that you're able to fully let go and trust the process, right? One surge, 1 minute at a time, where nothing else matters. That there is where the process completely takes shape and changes. Because at that point, you're able to let go of all perceptions of what you thought it was really supposed to be like. I love how we totally circled back to perceptions,
I was
right?
thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, we really did circle back. Yeah.
Yeah. And really be able to be fully present and in the moment. Anybody can do anything for 1 minute, right? That's all it is.
Yeah,
1 minute.
and you know what? I feel like that's such a great metaphor for life too. Like going with the flow, trusting the process, because life is so much smoother when you're just going with it and relaxing into it versus like clenching your jaw and tightening your shoulders against it and trying to overly control everything. So I love that. I think that's a really beautiful message to leave everyone with, whether you are an expectant mother and are interested in hypnobirthing or you just want some really good life advice. So Patty, thank you so much for coming on today. Can you tell listeners where they might find you if they want to work with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being able to have me today, to be able to share my story with everybody. And you can find me on theexpressioncenter.com. I'm also on Instagram at PMC Expression. And you're able to connect with me, whether it's on Instagram or on my website. And I'm happy to be able to talk to you more about whether it's hypnosis to be able to decrease stress, anxiety, or overwhelm to become confident moms, or to talk about hypnobirthing and to be able to support your beautiful birth.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. Check out my book. It's called Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. All the links are below in the show notes for both Patty and myself. And this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. Check us out. We do a lot of really fun stuff. Coming up this coming weekend, well, by the time this airs, it'll be past, but October 14th to 16th, we are partnering with the Think and Grow Rich Institute to put on an amazing event, Think and Grow Rich Virtual Summit 2023. We have some amazing speakers, Les Brown, Mary Morrissey, Bob Doyle, Neil Donald Walsh. I'm so honored that I'm going to be a part of it. I'm going to be on a panel. So stay in touch, check out what we're working on. There's a lot of really great personal development to learn. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day.